Good afternoon. This is going to be the second video of a set of 4 videos looking at the history of Methodism. We're going to look at the history of the British sort of rise of Methodism. American Methodism, that will wait for another time. Last time we looked at the context in which Wesley was going to be raised, the culture, and so today we actually pick up with Wesley and when he starts being his own person and going off and doing things. And he goes off to college. He goes off to Oxford. It's the British educational system. It's different than the American system. He goes off at age 14. And so he is there from 14 until he's 18. And so while he's there, he starts getting together with 3 or 4 other guys, gathering weekly. They pray together. They study together. They go to church together. And spend a lot of time together. That's what happens, a bunch of guys in a college setting. And they are mocked for this. They're given, there's a set of terms and names that this group is given. They never named themselves. The only names that we know of is the names that people insult them with. They're called the Holy Club, as in, what do you think you are? Holier than we are, right? They're called the Bible Moths. They're called Methodist. Methodist was originally an insult, as in, why are you being so methodical, so dry, so boring? So this group, they meet together a couple times a week, and what they're doing as they do this, they develop it as a way of keeping track of themselves each day. They each keep a diary, and it's in a code. They all use the same code. These diaries, we didn't actually know how to read these diaries until the last generation or so, when a fellow named Richard Heisenreiter cracked the code that allowed us to read them. But Wesley, though we didn't know the results of what these questions were they were asking of themselves, they did make it public what these questions were, as Wesley eventually makes these questions public so people can use them, these questions themselves. And I think to listen to the questions starts to get at a particular focus of Wesley. He isn't going to ask, did I read the Bible today? That's a given. He's going to ask, did the Bible live in me today? Which is a different question. So here is one version of those questions that are asked. There's 21 of them. Imagine answering these every day. And then they would share how they were each doing with each other to be able to encourage and help and work through these things together. So here are the questions. Am I consciously or unconsciously creating the impression that I am better than others? Am I being a hypocrite? Do I keep confidentiality when I am told something? Can I be trusted? Am I a slave to dress, friends, work, or habits? Am I self-conscious, self-pitying, or self-justifying? Did the Bible live in me today? Did I give the Bible time to speak to me today? Am I enjoying prayer? When did I last speak to someone else of my faith? Did I pray about the money that I spent? Did I go to bed on time and get up on time? Which might seem like the oddball amongst these questions, but I know from my own experience, if I go to bed late and I don't get up on time, I don't have time to do all the things that are assumed I need to do to answer yes to any of the prior questions. If I stay up late and I don't get up and get going in the morning, I'm not going to have the time to make sure that the Bible speaks to me this morning, and I'm not going to enjoy prayer. I'm going to do it out of a sense of obligation, and I'm going to rush through it so I can get to the rest of my day. So it's actually an excellent question. Did I disobey God in anything? Did I insist upon doing something about which my conscience is uneasy? Am I defeated in any part of my life? Am I jealous, impure, critical, irritable, touchy, or distrustful? How do I spend my spare time? Am I proud? Do I thank God that I'm not as other people, just as the Pharisee was proud that they were not like the publican, is the biblical term? Is there anyone whom I fear, dislike, disown, criticize, hold a resentment towards, or disregard? And if so, what am I doing about it? Again, it's not enough to say I don't like someone. Like Wesley wants in this group, they want to make sure if there's a problem that you're doing something about it, being an ambassador, being a peacemaker. Do I grumble or complain constantly? Is Christ real to me? And so based on these questions, this group holds together, and it was worth their time. They kept on doing it. And so Wesley points at this time at Oxford, he calls it the first rise of Methodism. We're going to be covering the first and the second rise of Methodism today, and I'll just give you the punchline. Neither one of them changes the world and is what we now know as the Methodist Church. Both of them were sort of false start, so to speak, but Wesley did learn something really important about gathering this group of guys together and how powerful that can be. This is also the time at Oxford when he notices women for the first time, and his parents had been overbearing and meddling when it comes to their boys and how they dated, and so Wesley will never have good relationships with women. It's always going to be an awkward mess, as we're about to find out as they go to Georgia. This is the sort of second rise of Methodism, as this is using Wesley's terminology. There's three rises of Methodism. This is the second. This is sort of the second swing at it. He goes to Georgia. He has been newly ordained. It's his first appointment, you might say, in the Methodist terminology. He goes to Georgia. He is funded to do so by the Society for the Promotion of Christian Knowledge, which is a charity in Britain, and he's sent to England to cover a parish of 200 miles. And as he puts it, 200 miles laugh at the effort of one man, and that is so very true. He is expected to evangelize and teach and work with the Native Americans. But the Native Americans have already been sort of evangelized. Evangel means good news. To evangelize is to be good news to people. And they've already been evangelized by the Spanish Christians who have come through. And their version of evangelism was, be baptized or we will kill you. And then we will tell you what you will think. Understandably, the Native Americans were not all that thankful for this. This was not good news to them. And so when Wesley shows up to tell them about Jesus, they don't exactly get excited about Jesus, because the way that Jesus had been presented to them had been hard. Right? So that doesn't go all that well. He is also sent to teach those who were enslaved. And so this is in the 1730s, and so Wesley will only be there just shy of 2 years, right? So this is he's in Savannah, Georgia. This is like plantation, cotton, the whole, it might not be, it's before the cotton shit, but this is still plantation farms. And so he is sent as part of his job, part of his parish, is to go to the slaves, except his idea was to train a couple African Americans to be able to go from place to place preaching. And you could guess how that just doesn't work in that setting, in that time. You want them to go do what? Right? That just doesn't happen. Okay, so there is one group he gets along with. He gets along with the German Christians who had come over with him on the boat. Pietists is the name. They're pietists. That's the name for what Christian group they are. But they kind of go off by themselves, and Wesley gets along with them, but he's really left working with the standard sort of British settlers, and they're just too busy trying to survive, and they really don't take to what he is inviting them to do, which is to do what he had done at Oxford, to be together on a weekly basis and to take following Jesus seriously, and it just doesn't go very well. And then he meets Sophie. Did I mention that his relationships with women are awkward? He has something for Sophie. Sophie does not have something for him. And so Sophie marries another person, another guy. And she does it in a way that is not technically correct. She doesn't do the reading of the banns. So if you ever watch a movie, there's a wedding, marriage in a movie, there's always this moment where the priest or the pastor says something like, if anyone has any problems with this, speak now or forever hold your peace. I forget the exact wording, but that sense of like, if anyone has any objections, speak now or forever hold your peace. And that comes from what's called the reading of the banns. If you think back to sort of medieval British, sort of everyone lives in their own village, and you live with the people. You don't move away when you grow up. And so it was a very legitimate concern that you might be about to marry your cousin. So you got to watch who you get married to, because cousins marrying cousins is a bad idea. And so there would be 3 checks you put up at the church, like if so-and-so marries so-and-so, are they related? We need to check. So they put it up twice, and then the third time they would check would be at the wedding itself, when all the aunts and uncles had come in, from a distance, those who had moved away, and they do one last check. Hey, does anyone know if these two are related? If anyone knows that they're related, speak now or forever hold your peace. And they hadn't done this. They were still required to do this. And Sophie hadn't had this done. And so Wesley, who is miffed, because she ditched him, and who is now, she didn't go through the proper wedding procedure, he denies her communion, which doesn't go over well with her or her new husband. And the new husband has Wesley brought up on charges. And in this century, 18th century, there is no separation between church and state. The queen was the head of state and the head of the church. And so, to be brought up on charges for incompetence or misbehavior as a pastor was a state offense. And so he runs. At the end of it, hasn't been quite 2 years, he gets on the next ship and he goes home. He runs away. Here are the charges he's charged with. As you hear, you start to understand they were kind of not sure they told water, but he just didn't want to deal with the trial. He is charged with speaking to Sophie Hopke, speaking to Sophie against her husband's wishes. How dare he, right? He had refused her communion. He had divided morning worship on Sunday. He started a second worship service. That scoundrel. He had not declared his adherence to the Church of England publicly. He had refused to baptize by sprinkling. He wanted to use more water. Okay, fine by me, right? He stopped Mr. Goff from taking communion. He had not buried Nathaniel Polhill, who was an Anabaptist. Anabaptists at the time didn't exactly get along with the state, and so if Nathaniel Polhill had been brought back to life and asked, do you want a representative of the Church of England or representative of the state to bury you, he would probably have declined the honor, truth be told. But this is still one of the charges. You can see they just don't hold water. He was charged with calling himself the Ordinary of Savannah, a title that he was accused of not deserving. That he had refused to allow two people to be godfathers, which he'd done because they weren't members of the church, which just makes sense to me. Okay, so he goes back to England, and it is on the journey on the boats that he has one last experience I think is really worth pointing out, because it drives what happens next. It's on the journey from England to America and then back as well that he grapples with his own fear. If you've ever been sailing, it's scary when you're on the ocean, and if there's a storm, it can get scary. And he's scared. And these German pietists, they're not scared. They're singing psalms, and Wesley is scared. And so he asks them, and he asks himself, what do they have that I don't? Why, if I follow Jesus, am I scared about death? And so he has to grapple with that. And when he gets back to England, he's going to go and he's going to spend some time on the continent because he wants to go meet more of these folks and learn more about what their experience is, because it's that sense of assurance that he really is desiring to have for himself. So that is the first and the second rise of Methodism. Next week we'll get to the third rise of Methodism when things really start going, and then we'll spend the last Sunday, the fourth Sunday, we'll look at, once it's up and running, what is the Methodist Church? Well, what's the Methodist Reform movement in England look like? It's worth remembering, John Wesley died a Church of England priest. His Methodist Reform movement was always a reform movement of the Church of England. He didn't want to start a church. He wanted to lead the Church of England to be more healthy, more Christ-like. So thank you for taking the time I hope you're enjoying the story, and I'll see you next time.